Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today I want to show you several destruction techniques. So this was one of the versions. This was another version where basically not the entire wall falls down, just the middle of it gets destroyed like this. So let me show you one more time. This was a third version that I made where I have a lot of secondary destruction going on. So that one ended up looking something like this. So I'll show you the basic setup and then we can go into more detail and more advanced techniques of adding these secondary fragmentations. So let's just set it up from scratch. All right, so this is gonna be our starter scene. I'm working in units, centimeters. 1 unit is 1 centimeter. And the car is scaled according to real world scale. So if I drag this out, it's about 400 centimeters long, about 4 meters, which is what it would be in real life. So let's just make the wall that we're going to drive through. So maybe do something like that. And I already animated the car across 80 frames to go forward. So now actually what I want to do is create a little bit of an effects placeholder, just because adding all of this geometry as a collision object to tyFlow, as fast as tyFlow is, it can get kind of slow. So what I did just to get the iteration process going faster was just create a box, and you can right click, make it an editable poly, and then select the edges, and we can turn on edged faces and just go under connect and add 2 edges to it. And then we can go under polygon and just extrude this out. So I'm basically just making a rough shape of the car, which we're going to use while we're setting everything up. And then in the end, we're going to swap this sort of proxy placeholder object for the actual car and do the final simulation of the destruction. So something super rough like this will work just fine. And let's name that our activator box. And we need to link the box to the car so that they move together. And then we can go under standard tyFlow and create a tyFlow object and open the editor. So first thing, we need to turn the wall into a particle, which we'll then be able to destroy. So let's just do a birth shape and pick the wall, and you can say display geometry and maybe set the color to gray. And then we can hide the actual wall object. So what we're left with is just a particle which has the shape of the wall. Now we need to fracture the wall. So I'm going to add a voronoi fracture, and I'm going to fracture this into about 1,000 pieces with 100% variation. So this is what we have so far. And of course, nothing is really happening still. So we need to add a physics shape. And now basically as soon as I do that, all of the pieces are turned into little physics objects and they just crumble down. But they're not colliding with our car here. So I'm going to add a physics collision and pick our activator box as the physics collision object. So now the car is interacting with the wall, but the wall still sort of starts falling down on its own. So let's just click on this activator box, go under object properties and make it display as box, just so that it doesn't look as bad. And now we basically need to set up a few conditions to tell tyFlow to only allow this wall to crumble when it's being hit by the car. So what I'm actually gonna do is take this physics shape and this physics collision out of the main event 1 node. And again, we can set this to geometry and change the color to maybe blue. And then I'm going to add a surface test condition into the main event and say distance to surface and set that to 150 centimeters. And for the surface test object, I'm going to pick the activator box. And I'm going to connect the 2. So this is what we have so far, and let me explain what just happened. So basically we added the wall and we fractured it, and then we have this surface test here which says if the car is 150 centimeters or less away from the wall, then I want you to activate the pieces of the wall and interact with the car. So it goes into this second event, and in that event it turns into that physics shape and the physics collision where it's interacting with the car, and we end up with something like this. So already we have a very simple sort of car going through a wall effect, which a lot of people have been asking for. So now let's just try and make this better from here. So I would actually like more of the wall to be affected. So I'm gonna go back into the surface test and maybe set the distance to 200 centimeters so I get more of a radius. Now this is pretty cool, except all of the pieces shatter very uniformly and it sort of looks like glass shattering. So we want to somehow make these pieces stick together more. So I'm gonna add a PhysX Bind and put it right under physics shape. So as soon as I add that PhysX Bind, you can see it basically the walls is stuck together as if it's one piece. So we're gonna go under the bind breaking here and enable breaking by force. And we can set the force to maybe 15,000. This is kind of a random number that you have to play with. I found that 15,000 worked pretty well. So basically now what I'm telling tyFlow is another condition. I'm telling tyFlow they're being affected by a force that's greater than 15,000, then I want you to break them again. So this is what we have so far. Let me play this. So this is pretty cool. You can see that some of the pieces stay stuck together, which already is giving us some nice variation. Now I think I'm gonna raise the force here to even something higher, like 17,000, just because I really like that glue effect. It's not bad, but let's just say that I want some of these pieces to break up even more, and maybe only pieces that are moving above a certain speed because they're being directly hit by the car should break up into even more fragments. So the way to set that up is to set up another condition. So I'm gonna do a property test and put it under the physics collision here. And for the property test type, we're gonna say velocity magnitude and maybe set the value to 15 and say test true if the property is greater or equal. So what I'm telling tyFlow is if the value of the speed of these particles or of these fragments is higher or equal than 15, then I want something else to happen. So I'm gonna add another voronoi fracture and another physics shape and another physics collision. And I'm gonna set the display again to geometry and set this to some other color again. So maybe let's do orange. And now let's connect the two and maybe set the voronoi fracture to 30 points with a 50% variation and see what we get. All right, so this is what we have right now. You can see that basically all of the blue chunks that are moving faster than 15 are being broken up further into these yellow fragments, which we just defined by this new event here. Now don't forget to add the activator box as your collision under collision. That's always, we're going to keep doing that over and over again. So now this is better, but the pieces are sliding across the ground a little too much as if they are too light. So what you can do is go under the physics shape, dynamics, and increase the static and dynamic friction to maybe 0.8, which will just tell the pieces to lose more energy when they come in contact with the ground or each other. So let me show you what effect that will have. All right, so now you can see that the pieces look like they're much heavier and they just sort of slow down right away. Let me play that back for you one more time. It's kind of fun to watch. So as of right now, this is where we stand with the setup. It's not bad. Now I think that some of these pieces are a little too small. It's getting a little too dense over here. So I'm gonna go back to the voronoi fracture and maybe set the points to only like 10 with a 20% variation. So now we have some big chunks and then we have some smaller chunks, and now we're gonna break it up one more time and break some of these fastest yellow chunks into even smaller fragments to add more detail. So I'm going to add another property test down here. So first, let's just copy this event 003, say copy and paste. We're gonna use that in a bit, and let's just change the color to something else again. So maybe let's do pink. And then we're gonna add another property test over here, and we're gonna do again velocity magnitude. If it's greater then let's say a value of 20, then I want it to be sent into this, let's call it event 004, just so they don't have the same name, and put it over here. And let's see what we have. All right, so now we have 3 colors going on, and basically the yellow pieces that are moving the fastest are being further broken up into these pink pieces, but I think there are a few too many of these. So I'm actually going to raise the speed of the condition here, and I'm gonna say that only pieces that are faster than 25 rather than 20 should get broken up into these pink chunks. So you can see how quickly it updated. Like in those few seconds, tyFlow basically calculated everything from frame 0 to frame 50. And this is what we have right now. So I really like that initial blast where the particles in the very front over here get broken up more. And maybe under this event 004, we can increase the amount of these pink fragments that's being generated. So let's increase that to 20. All right, so this is what we have so far. So let's just say that this is coming together, and really it just comes down to what reference you're looking at or your personal taste at this point. But I just want to show you some more of the techniques and conditions that you can use to further make this more interesting. So let's just say that some of these pink chunks are still a little too big. Let's just say that we would like only the chunks that are above a certain size to still get broken up, but the rest of them stay untouched. Well, for that, we can add another property test. But first, let's just copy this voronoi fracture setup because we keep reusing it. So let's just say copy and paste. And you can add another property test to our pink fragments here. And for this property test, let's set that by radius. And let's say greater. And for the value, let's just do maybe 15. So what I'm telling tyFlow is, if the pink fragments are larger than 15 centimeters in radius, then I want you to break them up even more. And let's set the color of this event to maybe green. And let's connect that to the property test and see what will happen. All right, so this is what we have right now. Not gonna lie, I've already tested the value 15 for the radius, so I knew it would work pretty well. But you can see that all of the big pink chunks that we didn't like are now broken up into these smaller green pieces, and the rest of the pink chunks is untouched. So just to prove that this works, I'm gonna go back into the radius for the pink chunks and set the radius lower to maybe 10. And what should happen is more of the pink chunks should turn into green. So let's just see what will happen. And it worked exactly as we thought. We lowered the radius for the condition, and so more of the pink chunks are now being broken up into this new event. All right, so this is what we have right now. So let's just say that I'm happy with what's happening with the impact with the car, but I want to do something about these blue chunks over here. So let's just say that when the blue chunks hit the ground, I want them to break when they come in contact with the ground. Now, I'm not saying that at this point we'll be making it any more realistic. I think if we were trying to make this as realistic as possible, we would leave some of these chunks to be big, but I'm just trying to show you as many of these techniques and different sort of conditions that you can use in your own project. So let's just set that up. Let's just say that that's something that we want to happen. So I'm gonna go under just standard and create a plane. And I'm gonna call it our ground. And you can right click object properties and make it display as box. Let's just go back to our blue chunks over here, which is event 002. Those are the blue chunks here. And we already have one property test telling them that if they are above a certain velocity, they break, which is awesome because as you can see, as they're falling, once they reach that threshold, they break further. So then when they hit the ground, they're already broken up. But some of these are too slow to reach that threshold and they don't break. So I'm going to add another surface test under the property test. And I'm going to say distance to surface. And if it's less than 10 centimeters, then I want something to happen. So I'm going to pick the plane as my surface for the surface test. So now I'm telling tyFlow if the blue particles are within 10 centimeters of the ground, then I want them to break even more. So we're going to copy this voronoi setup that we have one more time, paste it over here. And again, we're going to change the color to maybe white. And you can right click on this surface test and say switch output side, so it goes to the other side. And you can connect it to that voronoi fracture. And now let's see if it'll work. All right, so I had to raise the number to 20 centimeters instead of 10, but it is working beautifully. And now, as you can see, basically as soon as those big blue chunks come in contact with the ground, they are further broken up into these white chunks. You know, right now, a lot of these pieces are set up with the exact same voronoi fracture, so they're starting to look similar. So what you could do is go under the voronoi fracture and play with the amount of points and the variation. So maybe what we can do is set the points to only like 5, because they're pretty big chunks with a 50% variation, and see what kind of results we get from that. All right, so now again, when the blue chunks hit the ground, they further break into these still pretty big but smaller white pieces. And you can basically keep adding these conditions, and definitely go under the property test and look at all of these different test conditions that you can use. You can use scale, spin. So if anything is spinning faster than a certain amount, something else happens. You know, this is really where the power of tyFlow lies and where all the fun is. All right, so once again, this is what we have for the entire setup as of right now. And we could end it here, but I want to show you one more thing. So let's just say that we wanted the entire wall to be activated, because maybe if this was a real wall and the car would ram through it, the entire wall would fall over. There wouldn't just be a hole in there. So we can go all the way back to the beginning of the setup. You know, we have quite a few things in here, but I hope that if you watch this in order, you can see how each event flows to another. Basically, we're just breaking these particles into smaller chunks, and for that we always have another event. So what I can do is go all the way to the beginning where the gray wall, and you can always tell where you are by the color. So the gray wall is this gray point here. So I can go back to the surface test and increase the distance here to maybe 500. So I'm going to say that every gray piece that is within 500 centimeters of the car will become activated. So let's do that and see what will happen. All right, so I had to raise it to 700 centimeters because 500 wasn't enough to cover the entire wall, but this is what we have right now. So basically the entire wall crumbles and all of the different conditions that we set up are still applied. So as the blue chunks are falling, if they reach a certain speed, they turn into yellow chunks, which then turn into pink chunks. So let me show you up close. So that's what we have. So I could keep going because it's really fun, and I think that you're starting to understand how all of this really works. So I'm not going to keep breaking this up even further, but what I am going to tell you is that you could add another property test. And here you have a test type that says binds broken. And so remember, we added this PhysX Bind in here, which makes these pieces stick together. So what I can tell tyFlow is whenever these pieces start breaking, I want you to break them up even more. So just so you're aware, binds broken condition under the property test that you can use to basically break up these big blue chunks even more if you wanted to. But I'll leave that up to you. I gave you guys all of the tools that you need to play with this and do all sorts of fun destruction effects. Now, in order for you to render all of this out, you need to add a mesh operator, and you need to add that mesh operator under every one of these events in order for these individual event particles to show up. So you would just go under here and add a mesh operator under every single one. And then what we can do to see it without all of these colors is just go into material, select random material, apply it to tyFlow to see it in gray, and I can turn off etched faces. And so this is what it looks like without etched faces turned on and all the colors. Now, one more thing that we said we were gonna do is switch from this activator box into the actual car. So what you would do then is go under every single physics collision and switch the activator box for the body of the car. So I would just, hit remove, and then you can say pick and hit H on your keyboard. And I have this dummy here which controls all the parts for the car. So I'm just gonna select all of them and say okay. And then what you can do to get more accuracy is set the hull type to mesh, which will just give you much more detail in the simulation. So I'm gonna do it for all of these and then show you the final result. Okay guys, so this is the final result for this tutorial. I switched everything to interact with the actual car. You can see that the car has this antenna, which is giving the particles velocity, and then they brake and stuff. This probably wouldn't happen in real life, so I would either just remove the antenna or set this up as a separate collision, just so that it doesn't, break everything up so much. But I mean, it's pretty cool. So again, I hope that you found this helpful. If you did, I would appreciate if you could leave a comment to let me know, hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you like these kinds of tutorials. Thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you later.